Newcastle, and I'm first vice president of this county league, Westchester. And for everyone, it is my absolute privilege and pleasure to introduce to you today Dr. Deborah Turner. She is the 20th president of the League of Women Voters of the United States. She also is therefore chair of the board of trustees of the League of Women Voters Education Fund. Now, she has an extensive resume, which I'm not going to read out loud to you all, but I do encourage you to go to National's website and please read up on all of her accomplishments because they're quite impressive. I just want to highlight a few items that I think help give perspective. Dr. Turner has been president of her local league of Des Moines Metropolitan League. She's been vice president and then co-president of the Iowa State League, and she was elected to the national board of directors, the league's national board of directors in 2016. Now, as a board member nationally, she has served on the finance committee, governance committee, and she has chaired the diversity, equity, and inclusion committee. So she has quite the perspective at both local, state, and the national level. So again, please look at all of her wonderful accomplishments. Right now, I'd like to turn this over. And first, we're going to ask Dr. Turner to give us some words, and then we will do our casual fireside chat. So Dr. Turner.
Okay. Well, thank you very much for the lovely introduction. And as you just heard from that introduction, I've done a lot of things in my life, but League has become one of my most important things. And it's like I like to tell almost every audience that I speak to in League is that League is my endorphin. If I need something to get me pumped, I get engaged in a League event or activity, and it really helps. So once again, I thank you for having me here today. I wish I could be there in person with you, but this opportunity to share across space and time, which has become kind of standard during 2020, has opened so many new avenues to the League to grow and share, which I believe will become a standard part of our engagement moving forward. So I'm excited about this being another avenue for us to connect. It feels like a lifetime ago that I was elected president of the League of Women Voters of the United States. But in 2020, we all know time has played some funny games with us, okay? In fact, it was just a little more than 5 months ago at the national convention I first addressed the League in my new role. It was what a historic and challenging time to take the reins of this organization. When we started on our transformation road back in January 2018 was in preparation for the changes we were going to see coming for 2020. And this was supposed to be our year, and it has been our year. The League of Women Voters turned 100 in February, as you all know, and a month later, the world came to a crashing halt. The pandemic hit the United States just as many of you were preparing to cast votes in primaries, and the League was hard at work ensuring voters were turning out. The spring election starkly displayed the work we needed to do to prepare for the general election. We immediately entered into a flood of lawsuits to ensure voters could access the ballot box safely, often from their own homes. As a result, we fought to protect or expand voting rights with more than 60 lawsuits in more than 30 states, and we have a winning track record. I believe that the last time they were adding them up, Selena, our attorney, said that we had 58, she wanted 59, but that was okay. So many of our vital on-the-ground registration events were interrupted, including citizenship ceremonies, high school registration drives, but leagues got really creative. They were organizing drive-in registration events, GOTV car parades, virtual candidate debates, and one league even turned a food truck into a roving voter registration bus. The pandemic also affected our internal league business when we were forced to pivot our commemorative 100th anniversary convention in DC to a virtual event. I was in awe of the way the League of Women Voters staff and board flipped it over, and it became a virtual event, as well as the thousands of league participants who made sacrifices and concessions to ensure we could still have a unique and impactful 100th anniversary convention. And it was a success, and it was fun. And when yet another tragic incident of violence against Black Americans created a groundswell like never before, and people took to the streets to demand change, the delegates of our 2020 convention voted to elevate our policy of diversity, equity, and inclusion to its rightful place in our organizational bylaws, sitting right next to and equal to our nonpartisan policy. Because we are an organization dedicated to the fight against voter suppression, especially that which targets people of color, income-sensitive individuals, those with disabilities, and Native peoples among many, it is essential that our commitment to diversity, equity, and inclusion is not only a policy, but a part of our organization's very DNA. When I reflect on the 100 years of women's voting rights and the founding of this organization, I see much to learn from both inspirations and mistakes. 2020 is not all that unlike 1920 in many ways. Our founders worked through a pandemic themselves, the 1980 flu pandemic. To win the 19th Amendment 100 years ago, I drew inspiration from their dedication to the cause. And yet, our 100 years of history were not inclusive of all women or allies. We know the 19th Amendment did not extend voting rights to women of color in many areas of the country or to Native women. And it's the League's job today to ensure that people of color in this organization have an equal seat at the table. We can accomplish this goal by applying an equity lens to everything we do, from budgeting to scheduling League meetings, to engaging with partners, to making policy changes, and to selecting our leaders. By making DEI part of our DNA, we have the power to realize our goals and ensure we are inclusive and equitable in our work. The civil unrest that we have seen over the last several months is our call to action too. The structural racism that has existed in this country since its founding continues to be at the forefront of many Americans' minds. This is a wake-up call that America has long required and long ignored. Structural racism touches our lives in many ways, from education to healthcare to economics to policing. The Band-Aid has been ripped off. Now is the moment to heal the egregious wound and not rebind it and hope it will heal itself, out of sight, out of mind. It doesn't work that way. Trust me, I'm a doctor. It is our responsibility to take this work to the next level as allies in the civil rights community. Frankly, this is not our space to lead in, but as members and supporters of our organization, we must lean into this moment and offer our unity, our support, our voices, and our hands. That well may be requiring us to be prepared to sit down and stay away if we are asked to do so. Humility and listening will serve us well. There are those who say the League is a democracy organization, not a social justice or civil rights organization, but how can you separate them? At the heart of the issues, democracy, social justice, women's rights, and civil rights are intersectional, intertwined by the collective goal of advancing the right to vote. The League sees equal access at the ballot box as a way to reach the goals of social and racial justice. The national office is making this commitment to social justice reform and has hired a staff person to build out a program and ensure we are being good partners to all the groups leading in this movement. Now that the dust is settling on the 2020 election almost, and we reflect on our hard work and the record voter participation we saw nationwide, we are looking to the redistricting cycle that will start next year based on the 2020 census that will have lasting impact for the next decade. Redistricting has long been a focus of League, and through our people-powered Fair Maps campaign, we are working to ensure that people have their say to participate more deeply in their communities this time around. My vision for the next millennium, in a word, is progress. Progress for League, progress for women, for the American voter, and progress toward racial justice. The dictionary definition of progress is forward or onward movement toward a destination or goal. And the goal is empowering voters and defending democracy in order to form a more perfect union. The League has entered an era of evolution. We have made a deeper investment in ourselves through intentional organizational transformation and deepening our commitment to DEI so that we can truly become an organization reflective of the country we serve. For me, voting is sacred. When I think about our suffrage leaders who worked so hard against all odds to win the right for women to vote, particularly the women of color who were doing this work despite the added challenges and discrimination they faced, I get emotional and I get motivated. This is our right, enshrined in the Constitution, and we refuse to let it be taken away. As long as there will be people trying to silence voters, there will be the League. Nothing will stop our work, not misinformation, not voter suppression, not polarization, not a pandemic. So it all comes back to our mission of empowering voters and defending democracy. As long as there's any form of social inequality, the League will be a force to reckon with, fighting in the courts and advocating in the halls of power. We will continue to stand up for voters and provide the information every time. And regular voters, new voters, and regular everyday voters will get the information they need every election cycle, every election, local or national, and all the days in between. So I look forward to working with all of you in the future on many of these issues. And once again, thank you for having me here today.
Thank you so much for all of those words. I have a number of questions that we wanted to talk with you about today, and it kind of spans all of these different issues, some of which you've already brought up. 2020 has been such a challenge, and I think that's the biggest understatement I could make. What are a few of the League's accomplishments in 2020, trying to put a positive spin on 2020?
Yes. Well, first of all, just thinking about the amazing job we did getting out, working through an election cycle that was very, very difficult. The number of people we registered, the number of people that we were able to educate, and the fact that because we couldn't go out and sit at tables or walk through malls and register people didn't stop them. And we saw that the number of people who turned out to vote, let's not pretend that that was somebody else doing that. A lot of that work came from the work of the League members that have boots on the ground. And one of the things that, you know, it's always like I'm kind of a data person in many ways. So it's like, say, okay, show me the numbers. And so one of the really amazing things we saw was, you know, our vote411.org site that we use for voter registration, education. It just expanded this year phenomenally. We reached just minimally over somewhere around 7 million people easily. There were almost 200,000 who registered directly through our site. And one of the really greatest accomplishments of this year was taking Vote 411 and making it into bilingual. So it's completely translated into both Spanish and English. So it became available, and our Spanish speaking voters who used it were very excited, and the numbers were incredibly high. So that was one of our really big accomplishments. One other one I'd like to mention is that, you know, sometimes for the League, we don't toot our horn enough. Okay. And we kind of sit back, we do our thing. And one of the things we notice as we're going through our transformation process is that we are really a mighty organization. There are very few organizations that have the wide reach that we have. 50 states plus Hong Kong, 750 plus individual leagues, and over 600, somewhere between 600,000 and 700,000 members, somewhere in that range. We're a huge group, and we have a footprint in every state in America and almost every district. So we have power that other organizations are starting to look at. This year, we have increased our relationship with other nonpartisan and voting organizations. At least 60 new organizations have come to us saying, can we partner with you? Can we help you? So we're out there. And the great thing about it is we're not just tooting our horn to say, yes, see us, we're saying because we're doing good stuff. And that's really critical, and it's going to move us forward and move America forward. So
I'm really glad that you highlighted how broad the reach is of the League. I think sometimes it's easy to forget that we're relevant. There are so many newer groups that have kind of stepped up in recent years, and that's fantastic. It's good to see other people getting involved, but it's nice to remember that we definitely still have relevance.
Oh, yes, right, absolutely.
So now on to challenges. I mean, what do you think the biggest challenges we have facing the country, and how do you think the League can step up and address them?
You know, that was a very interesting question. I noticed that in your previous, and you know, the responses usually are things like, you know, we have the challenge of, for example, healthcare. We have the challenge of our economic distress that we're in now. And obviously we have the challenge of beating the pandemic. But when I look at it, I think the real challenge that we are facing right now in our country is not partisanship, because being partisan is part of living in a world where we have a two-party system, basically. But it's the fact that we are not willing to come to the table. We need many voices. We need different opinions and different ways to approach things, because there are different parts of the country. You know, where you are right now is entirely different than Omaha, Nebraska, for example, or, you know, or somewhere in Alaska or California, wherever it may be. I mean, entirely different communities, different needs. But the problem being that seems that we are forgetting how to talk to each other. So one of the biggest challenges I think facing us is civility in our interaction. Because if we can figure out a way to talk to each other and come to the table, that's something that can be done. And that's something that the league can do. Standing in our nonpartisan piece where we can listen to voices from either sides, we need to be the forefront of bringing civility back to discussions at the community level, discussions between each other, and discussions around policy and engagement. I think it's very, very critical.
I couldn't agree with you more on that. Our next question has to do with voting rights. And, we all know that the league challenges any effort, any tactic to suppress democracy, to suppress people's ability to exercise their right to vote. So what do you think we can be doing? How can the league advocate moving forward for voters' rights?
One of the ways that, doesn't seem immediately apparent is that one way to move, besides seeking out and listening to and understanding the issues of voter suppression or voters' rights, and allowing, groups to come to us or individuals when they say this is a problem, sometimes we have to listen, because we tend to sometimes think that, here, we figured out what the problem is, so we're going to go to you, explain to you what the problem is and how to fix it. When sometimes we need to listen to the folks who are coming to us and saying, oh, we didn't recognize that's a problem. And I'll give you a real specific example. So I was on a talk with, I think it was, with an Ohio group a little while back. And they were talking about voter suppression. And we were talking about mail-in voting. And they were talking about the fact that they had communities where there weren't even mailboxes, or they didn't have mail services to their, for example, their high rises or their apartment complexes, and that they had been taken out or taken away, and they hadn't been there for a long time. So when we started talking about mail-in voting and assuming that this is the answer to everything, we had to step back further and think, some constituencies don't even have that option. So that ability to look and listen and realize that we're going to have to come up with some other unique ways to address suppression and understand there are different forms of suppression. The other thing is that I feel that the other thing we can lead in and what we can do is civic education. And I'd like to see every local league, every state league developing some program of civic education that really delves into helping American voters and citizens and everyone who lives in the country understand how our system works, how the voting system works. Think of how many people this year had never even understood or heard of the Electoral College, and the ones that now have heard of it and see it probably have a very warped vision of what it means, whether it's pro the college or against the college, whatever. But why is that? And that's because we've kind of lost that education piece, that basic education piece about what it means to be a democracy, or at least an American democracy, and how we work, how you engage civically, and what it means to, how you can engage and what that means. So that knowledge piece, and that's the piece that the league has. We know how to do that. So we just need to build out the program to teach it and take it to the high school levels. I mean, if you even take it to the junior high levels, start making partnerships with our educational partners where we can say, we would like to help do this. I think that would be really move the dial for us.
Yeah, I think that's fantastic. I know this probably feels like a little bit of a speed round. We're just trying to get to so many different.
Oh, that's okay. That's no problem. I'm sorry. And I sometimes get chatty, so you can always do that, grab.
No, you're fine. But well, we'll move on to something I know that's been a big part of your work and involvement, especially recently with the league, which is diversity, equity, and inclusion. And you chaired that committee for a national league. What kinds of issues do you think that the league should be promoting in terms of social and racial justice in our community?
Well, I think a couple things. First of all, we need to take an internal look and look at ourselves and understand what racial injustice means. When we look at the whole spectrum of diversity, equity, and inclusion, there are basically three buckets. And it's kind of like our tri-federated system. It's your personal self, and then it's your organizational self, and then it's your community self, okay? So from the personal self, first of all, we need to start doing some reckoning with ourselves, looking to where are our implicit biases, or do we understand what microaggressions are, or where do we see differences within our community that we can help. Organizationally, what we need to do is take a DEI lens, which we have available on our website, and use that lens, which is basically 6 questions to determine every action that we undertake, asking the basic questions: who's engaged, who's not engaged, how will it affect this group, how will it not affect, who is not at the table, what could be the bad outcomes, how can we make this a more diverse, equitable activity. And then the third thing is our community. And that, there are many leagues that say, well, DEI doesn't have anything to do with our community because there isn't anybody in our community that's, we really don't have any Black people in our community, or we don't really have a lot of Native American. Those are not the only issues of diversity in our country. There are all kinds of diversity that we have to take a brighter look. The economic diversity piece is a really big issue for the league, because we think about, we have quote unquote dues, call them what you will or may. And some people can't afford to become part of their league because of that, or they think they can't because we haven't been, we haven't thought outside the box, and so those are part of it. But we also have to understand that if the league is to be successful and to live through the next 100 years as a strong group, we have to start reflecting the communities and who we are and who America is. So we have to bring more people into the fold. And a lot of time, that's just a lot of that simple thing: develop a relationship with an individual person and ask them, and that's hard to do sometimes. And then sit down and say, let's have some hard conversations, team up with another organization in your city, like the YWCA or whatever organization you have that's doing this work, and say, let's have a community conversation on these issues around DEI, what our community needs, who we are, what we can do better. And take that big gulp and take a few hits, because we're going to hear things that maybe we're not really happy about, but that's okay. It's going to make us stronger and better. So.
Absolutely. No, that's fantastic. Now, our next question that we wanted to talk about was healthcare reform. So I'm going to ask, we have one of our league members, Madeline. Kathy, can you unmute her, or I'll try to find her quickly. Or Madeline, unmute.
I think I'm unmuted.
Okay, so go ahead, Madeline.
Okay. Our New York State League is currently updating our healthcare policy to guide our advocacy around achieving universal, affordable, and equitable health care that both national and state leagues call for. As a physician, I'm curious whether you have given much attention to single-payer systems, such as the single-payer legislation New York State is currently considering, and what aspects of our current multi-payer healthcare system you think might need the most reform.
Thank you, Madeline.
Thank you. That's a heavy lift question, but a very critical one. The league and I too agree that we need to get to a point where we have a universal healthcare system in America that guarantees that healthcare should not be a privilege and it should be a right. And that's the problem right now. Healthcare in many areas in our country is a privilege. And we have to really stop that, change that. So if it comes out to be at some point a single payer system that works for our country, that's great. Any system that we can put together that guarantees that everybody has access is going to be critical. And it's going to take some steps, because I was talking about this, in fact, with some of my providers just a few days ago, and said, like, it's not a situation where we can stop one system we have now and immediately switch over to another system overnight. I mean, it's going to have it has to be a very, very, how should I say, organized plan to switch from where we are to where we want to get, because otherwise will be chaos, and what will happen, we'll lose more people in the process. So it'll be steps. So for example, one of the first steps, obviously expanding Medicaid was really a big step, although many states didn't expand it. That would have been a good start to add to some of the things that we're doing. But it's more than access. I used to be, in my medical years, I was also, and still am somewhat, a teacher or an instructor. I worked at several different universities. And having access to healthcare is really critical, but you have to have access to adequate and good healthcare. And one of the things where we're falling short in this country is that everybody doesn't have the same level of quality care. So as we change to a system that provides more care, we have to make sure that we're building into it good education for our healthcare providers, diverse and equitable education. We need to make sure that we are reaching people in the inner city as well as rural areas of the country who also have very bad access to healthcare or quality healthcare in some situations. And we have to look at our institutions that are educating our healthcare providers and say, hey, you need to step up to the plate. And you need to develop programs where you are basically providing for us healthcare providers who have the knowledge and the ability to give quality care no matter where they live and where they are. Because there are holes in our educational system from healthcare also. So those are all pieces that we have to deal with. And, and you should not be allowed to have better healthcare just because you live in the right zip code. I think we've heard that say education shouldn't be determined by the zip code you live in, nor should healthcare. So I agree with you.
Yeah, I agree. And healthcare is near and dear to my heart as well. So I look at what the league's doing, and I look at just in general what's happening. It's so multifaceted. It is not something we can fix just overnight. So as we keep going with our speed round, it feels like
Okay.
Our next question moves on to our own league membership, and that there are many local leagues in particular that kind of are aging out. Our membership is of a certain age. And what do you think we can do? How can we attract younger members, younger professionals, and get them excited about working with us and continuing what we're doing?
So a couple things, Sarah. This is very exciting. As you know, one of my kind of platforms, so that is intergenerational conversation and getting this space where we're all engaged. And first of all, we have to rethink how we're structured, rethink how we do quote unquote meetings, rethink how we do events, and start being very creative about allowing people or letting people or engaging people to be involved in the league in whatever their time frame works for or whatever their passion is. So if somebody wants to be a league member and they only want to deal with one aspect of whatever your program may be that year, be it climate change, maybe it'll be trafficking. I don't know. There are multiple things that we engage in, right? That find that acceptable. We kind of think that if you want to be a league member, you have to be in it for, 100%, and you have to be engaged, and you have to go to all these meetings. You have to do this and that. No. Make avenues, like little pods. I guess I would call them League of Women Modern pods. Develop pods within your league so that you can bring people in. And then we have to go out to groups, find groups to talk to about this. If there's a young professionals business group in your community, or a young professionals or a teachers group, make the effort to go out and say, this is who we are, and this is what we do. Tell our story. One of the things we're starting, you may have heard this too, there's still this misconception of what the league looks like and what we do. And there's still people out there that really think that what we do is the presidential debate. So what happened to the league because they weren't doing presidential debates? No, we haven't done those for years, So we need to tell our story. But I was talking with another league just a couple of weeks ago, and it's a very interesting thing. They have done these studies around they're working on civic engagement, and they do these studies where you read a case, and then they bring students and teachers together. And they said they've started what they call they don't call them League of Women Voters, local leagues or that. They have league clubs within their high schools. And they have gone out and when they go to do registration, they do more than just registration. They've talked with the students about what they do. And students have said, well, couldn't we just have a little group ourselves? And the students will latch on to wanting to learn about one given area of that. So they become a league club within, their high school. And that then, when they leave high school, what are they going to do? They're going to want to continue to be a league. So they go to their college and do the same thing. And then pretty soon they're a league member for life, like many of us are becoming or have been. So once again, it comes down to innovation. We can't be afraid to do something differently. I remember my local league, the first time we decided to do kind of a member thing, and we just had kind of wine, after work, that 4 o'clock, 5 o'clock time when a lot of our particularly young professionals or young workers would be out, at one of the local stopping. So that's where we had our event, and we intermingled with the group, and people are going, oh, Mo, we can't do that. That's not a membership meeting. It was very successful, and we got a lot of new members. They were amazed to see us there and see that we were willing to engage. And finally, I know I'm running on here, but I heard a statement the other day that was very captivating, that you're right, we need the youngest, we want the youngest and the brightest and the most active and the most engaged people to join the league. But we also need the wisdom of the folks who've been there before and know how to get things done. So if we can marry that enthusiasm and that new knowledge with the wisdom of our older members, that's the key. So I say start developing mentoring relationships, and it's not the older members mentoring the younger. It'll be the younger members or younger people mentoring the older too, and acknowledge it's a two-way street. So it's out of the box. We have to get out of the box and do things that make us uncomfortable, but we will find might be very pleasant. Because I bet you there are a lot of league members who will do a lot of things with their with their family, with their grandchildren, with their children, that they would never dream of having done because they finally stepped out of the box so they could engage with their family. So we can do that as a league too.
Yeah, growth can be a little uncomfortable, but it's necessary. Now,
Right.
I'm curious, and I'm sure a lot of our members are curious too. How do you see the relationship between the local leagues and national? Now that you have that broad perspective of having to have a leadership role on all levels, so what do you think should be the relationship between local and national?
I think that if we look at it, national should be there to aid and abet, to help and provide, okay? And to make some big decisions about the overall big leadership of where the league is going, on a larger scale, who we engage with nationally, how we become a national face. And the local leagues are really the people that are doing the work. And I guess one of our previous leaders used to say the boots on the ground. So I feel that there has to be a communication between the two. And one of my other real big platform issues is internal communication, because I think where it breaks down is that locals feel like they can't talk to national, or they can't reach people at national, or they're not being responsive. And so we're going to really work on that, because a local league should be able to reach out to the national league and say, this is my concern, or this is my problem, can you help me? And we should be able to figure out a way to get them help either through another league. And the other role of national, and I just was thinking about this the other day, is to help leagues connect with each other. Because if your local league's having an issue, I can almost guarantee you that there's another local league across the country. It may be, on the coast one way, or it's down south or up north, who knows, that has had the problem or has a unique program they're using. We need to figure out how to make those connections, because national's not going to have all the answers, but we know there are leagues out there that can help each other. And national should be that bridge of bringing leagues together, interleague interaction. So I really am looking forward to ideas on how to work on that piece. So just so you know, and I'll just throw this out, we're going to develop 2 task forces in the next year. One's going to be on leadership development, and one's going to be on league structure. And we're going to be looking for members from across the country to be on these. And these are not going to be just nationally driven. And we're going to, the ideas that you have about these things, just like this issue of how, when it comes to league structure, how are those local leagues interacting with the national, and what do local leagues want from us? We need to know, and we need to tell you where our shortcomings are, because we're not a 1,000-person staff, unfortunately. But by the same token, our only role as a national board member, and my only role as president, is to serve the membership. That's what I do. Obviously we promote the league principles, stand on principle, make sure we're doing the things we're supposed to do with our policies, but to serve the membership in any way that I can. And that is the way this board is going to operate. So
I appreciate that. And I actually appreciate you bringing up communication issues, because we've had some members say they've had difficulty, they've emailed, they've reached out, not necessarily that this is like a local league saying that they're being ignored by national, but the members have reached out with issues or comments, and they don't get an answer. They don't feel that they don't know if they've been heard or acknowledged. So it sounds like you're going to be putting something into place to make sure that people are
Yeah.
at least
Yes.
yeah.
At least acknowledged, and absolutely. And I will just also say this, you can always reach out to our CEOs, you can reach out to Kelly, who is our chief of staff, whatever, but you can reach out to me if something is happening that just doesn't get, because the board is responsive to what the membership's needs are. So if a member is having an issue, they can reach out to me, or they can find out who their state liaison is and reach out to their state liaison. There's no reason that only the state board can talk to the national board members. There's no such rule. Okay. So we want to know, because if we don't know, we can't help fix it and we can't work together on it. So I'm not opposed to letting us hear what the concerns are.
I really appreciate it. I know everybody listening appreciates hearing that and feels that, there will be a response, and that's important. Also,
Yes.
everybody who's listening, please remember that there are the 2 task forces. So if you are interested, or if you know somebody who might be, I'm sure Dr. Turner would appreciate, hearing when they put the call out for assistance and help.
Oh, absolutely. Yeah, I'm begging for help from all across the country. So I want you guys to be engaged too, okay?
We have a lot of local talent here that I'm sure would be an asset. Our last question before we let you go, and I have to say we really appreciate all of your answers and your willingness to answer some of these tougher questions. But where do you see the league in the next 5 years?
I see the league as becoming literally even more of a leading force in the democracy space. I think you're going to see more and more people and organizations around the country turning to the league, acknowledging the power that we have, and wanting to, quite frankly, harness our power to use it to their event. And I also see the league in the next 5 years beginning to more clearly reflect what America looks like, and with a little bit of humility, okay, and a little bit of acknowledgement from whence we came. My mom used to always tell me, you have to remember from whence you came, because that's going to help you know where you're going. And so I really think that those are going to be big changes that you're going to see. And I do believe that the communication piece is going to be better. And we're going to see a lot more young folks joining the league, I think. That's what I see in 5 years. Because if we don't, we're going to be, as that old saying used to say, dead in the water. And we don't plan on being there. We've been here 100 years. We're going to be here 100 years more. So, okay.
Well, it all sounds good. It sounds like a little bit of hard work, but that's okay. That's never scared a league member before. So, yeah. Well, thank you so much, Dr. Turner. I appreciate it. I know everybody else appreciates it. If we were in person, you could hear applause, but here, if you can see everybody, I'm sure they're all doing this. So thank you so much for coming and answering our questions. We look forward to working with National in the future. And now, Kathy, you have a few words?
Deborah, again, this is Kathy Meany, and I just want to thank you so much for accepting our invitation. We were just so happy to get you for ourselves and not have to share you with the rest of the nation. And we so appreciate all these insights that you've given us and good ideas. I mean, I've got 2 pages of notes to put together again. And as an interleague organization here in Westchester, we also are here to help all of our 8 local leagues within the county. So I appreciate, the fact that, even from a national standpoint, it's not such a hierarchy that we cannot reach out to you, because we have that same vision here in our county. So again, I thank you so much. We all thank you and wish you a very, very happy, happy holiday and blessed new year.
Thank you very much. And once again, thank you for having me. And now you guys have provided with me my endorphin for the day. So I appreciate it.
That's great. Thank you so much. Well, group, this brings our program, our holiday celebration program, to a close, in addition to our board of directors meeting. So I don't have a glass of wine, but I have a glass of iced tea. And I just toast all of you and wish you well. Enjoy the next few weeks off. I'll be getting the revised budget statement to everybody. And feel free to tune in to the Board of Legislature meeting on December 9th at 7 p.m. And you can watch all the presentations that are given that evening, or I should say all the statements. So again, thank you all so much for what all of you do. And I wish you well, especially as we move into the new year. Thank you.
Thank you, Kathy. Bye-bye.
Bye.